Mm. Oh, hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today you are in for a treat. And by the way, have I ever told you the story about the young kid that went in 5th grade in Pennsylvania? No? Okay guys, you are in for a treat. Buckle up, because this is gonna be something different. Let's continue the story of the bad dog part 2. And by the way, thank you so much guys, and enjoy.
What is your emergency? If you would like to leave a callback number, press 2.
Subscribe now.
So you want to hear the story of the kid from Pennsylvania. Thomas Williams was his name. Thomas was a 13-year-old boy who lived on the outskirts of the town of Westchester, more in the countryside than in the city. He lived in a small farmhouse with his father Jake and his mother Alice and his dog Ben. But Thomas was not a happy boy because at school there were some bigger boys who bullied him. Every day after school, he went home unhappy and in despair. The big boys bullied him because he lived in the country and didn't wear the same branded clothes as the many other boys. Thomas had a big heart by nature because that was just the way he was, but this day was worse than the others because two of the big boys, Kenneth and Jacob, pushed him to the ground and kicked him, took his bag and threw it. Kenneth tore his shirt in pieces while Jacob kicked his bag around the schoolyard. Thomas started to cry and was scared because they were much bigger than him. Then the school bell rang and the big boys started running to class because they knew very well that the school guard would come by. Thomas stood up, he gathered his things together while his tears still rolled down his cheeks. He started walking home. When he got home, his mother saw that Thomas had been crying and had bruises on his legs and arm, and his clothes were in pieces. His mother was very upset by what she saw. She called Jake. Thomas's father came down the stairs. He saw Thomas and was very upset and angry about what had happened. You know how it is. Thomas's dog Ben could feel that Thomas was sad and scared. It was like that for a long period of time. And every time Thomas came home and was upset, Ben would make loud noises and bark, and pull Thomas's clothes. That's what Ben always did, and together they ran down to the forest, where there was an old sewer that no one ever came by. It was a forbidden area. They spent a lot of time there together, playing and running around, but none of them ever went into the sewer. It was deep and dark. Further inside, the light faded completely black. Ben always drank from the water that ran from the sewer because he always got thirsty from all that running. They always spent many hours there, many days a week. One day Thomas came to school. He was always alert about the big boys. There was especially Kenneth. He was the worst. But there was none of them to be seen, only the school guard and other children who were also on their way to school. The school guard smiled at Thomas and told him not to be afraid of the bad boys anymore because they had been kicked out of the school and moved to another school. A school for young children with problems. Thomas was relieved to hear this, but he was still scared to meet them because they lived in the city. After school, Thomas went home. On the way home, Thomas passed the local supermarket, where there were 3 men talking about something with a silo that contained toxic chemicals that had been broken and had crashed. Thomas knew something about where this silo was. He thought it should be west of the forest, which they played in so often. When Thomas came home, he was received by Ben, who faithfully stood by the door and looked after Thomas. Ben was happy to see Thomas. When he entered the house, he met his father, who was sitting in the kitchen and listening to the radio, who told about the silo which had collapsed. They warned about the release of the chemicals. They also said that there were specialists on site and therefore no reason to be afraid. His father told Thomas to stay away from that area because it was dangerous. "I will," said Thomas to his father. Jake said he might as well take Ben out because Ben had been crazy all day. "I guess I will," said Thomas and went out the door. He couldn't see Ben out front. Thomas heard sounds that came from behind the house. He could hear it was from Ben. Thomas ran around the house. There he saw Ben running around in circles and making strange noises. Ben wasn't what he used to be, his mood was different. Thomas took Ben with him and they ran out to the forest. But Ben ran so fast that Thomas could not keep up. Thomas ran as fast as he could and called out to Ben, but Ben was gone. Thomas ran and ran until he reached the forest. When Thomas came to the old sewer, he saw Ben drinking from the water. Thomas got a shock. The water that Ben drank from was now completely green with a yellow glow. Thomas exclaimed loudly, "Stop, Ben, don't drink the water, Ben." But Ben wouldn't stop. Thomas ran to Ben and grabbed him by the neck and pulled him away in a hurry. Ben growled and his body moved as if someone wanted to hurt him. Thomas took Ben home again. Thomas had just entered the door when he met his father, who said to Thomas, "You haven't been up to the silo, have you, Thomas?" Because they just said on the radio that the toxic substances were very dangerous and contained substances that could make you very ill and you would have to rush to the hospital in a hurry if you had been in contact with it. Thomas wouldn't dare to say anything to his father about the water that Ben had drinking from. Instead, Thomas said, "No, father, I was only in the forest." That night Thomas couldn't sleep. He lay thinking about Ben. Hoped nothing happened to him. Thomas was eventually so tired that he fell asleep. He woke up later that night to some noises he couldn't recognize. They came from outside. It sounded like they were far away. Thomas thought they were creepy. He became restless and sneaked down to look for Ben. But Ben was nowhere to be found in the house. Now Thomas was scared. He whispered into the air, "Ben. Ben, where are you?" But no sound from Ben. Thomas looked into the living room and could feel a cool wind. Thomas saw that one window was open, but how? Now the thoughts went through Thomas's head. He hurried out into the hall and put on his shoes. Opened the door very carefully and ran out into the night. With his father's flashlight he started down the dirt road, but no Ben to be seen. Then he ran out to the field, but still no Ben. Now the sounds came again. Thomas became frightened and stood completely still. He took a deep breath. The sound came from the forest. It sounded like a big animal. Suddenly the sound changed. Thomas burst into the air. Ben, and started running towards the forest. He had just started running when he got so frightened. Thomas was struck by a light source from down the road and heard voices shouting,
"Come here, you little ugly boy!
Thomas quickly ran away from the road.
Come here, you little ugly boy! We will catch you!"
Then they started running up to Thomas. Thomas was really scared now. He could hear that it was the big boys from school who had run away. They came after Thomas. Thomas ran as fast as he could, away from Kenneth, away from Jacob, and away from them all. Thomas turned off the light as he ran. But they came closer. Thomas's heart was beating so hard that it felt as if it was on its way out of his chest. Thomas ran like he had never run before. He could hear them. They were close to him, but he didn't have far now before he reached the forest. Unfortunately, he had to turn on the flashlight so he didn't run into a tree or fall over something. Thomas could hear the big boys were right on his heels. He was close to the sewer now. It was the only place he could think of to hide so they wouldn't get him. He heard them shouting, "We're going to get you, you little wretched animal." Thomas came down to the sewer. The moon was shining down between the dense tops of the trees and struck the water, which almost lit up in the night. Thomas had no choice. He jumped into the water. The water almost reached his knees. Thomas bent down and ran into the sewer as far in, hoping they couldn't see him with the lights. If they should think of lighting into the sewer. Thomas sat completely still. He could hear them running around and shouting, "Just wait until we find you." Thomas heard something that moved right above him. He heard broken branches and heavy footsteps. He heard a deep growl. Thomas could hear the big boys say, "There you are," and ran up towards the sewer. But what they met there was no little. Thank you very much for listening. And that's as far as I go, my friends. All I can tell you is that the bad boys were never found and the case was closed and the police said they were taken by bears. What do you think? I will leave that up to you.
Hi guys, thank you for watching the video. Thank you Christopher for reading.
You are welcome, Martin.
Don't forget to leave a like, share, subscribe guys, and thank you so much. May I present to you the last of the piece. Enjoy. See you next time. Bye.